go. I'm excited to be here. Welcome, everybody. My name is Melissa Jerkweis. I co-founded Diversify Thinking, which is focused around helping leaders create intentional focus around diversity and inclusion from day one. We really do focus around startups, which is really timely because I'm a CXO at a startup here in the state of New Hampshire in the Northeast US, where we focus on user experience. So with both of those two things together, I come to you today to talk, probably not a surprise, about users. So there's a stakeholder that we often forget about when we're focused around digital transformation or large projects or anything where we're involving technology to be able to move forward in some way. We know for sure that we focus on executive buy-in. That's pretty clear. Why do we do that? We do that because without executive buy-in, we don't have funding or budget. We need to have executive buy-in to be able to move these initiatives forward, regardless of size, really. But what we often forget and leave behind is end user buy-in. So today, in the next few minutes, I'm hoping that I can instill in you some diversity of thought around these other stakeholders and why they're important and how you can not leave them behind in your transition to the cloud. Or again, you can apply this to any sort of technology transformation project that you happen to be implementing. So we as technologists, I've been a technologist now for 25 years and ranged in many different roles. And really what I've learned along the way is that we love the next shiny object, right? We love to chase technology as it advances. We get really excited about it. Somewhat so excited that we forget about the people on the other end that are going to be using the things we're building. And again, that's not to say that anyone's doing anything wrong or, you're not right to be excited. I get excited as well. Technology is advancing much quicker than we are as humans. So it's natural that we would be chasing it because we're always trying to keep up. But what I want to challenge you with today is that, regardless of how excited you are about the technology that you're building with and the output of that, like the outcome that comes out the other side, if your users don't really embrace it, then it doesn't matter, right? What you have there is what I often refer to in my career as shelfware. It's just going to literally sit on a shelf and no one's going to use it. And if no one's using it, there's a thing that I always said to my team when I was working in product management. It was, if no one's using your product, then it's wrong. Well, engineers don't like to hear that because they don't want to hear that something they built and put their blood, sweat, and tears into is wrong. But I'm here to tell you, if no one's using it, it absolutely is, because it's wrong until someone tells you it's wrong or right. So you need users. They're really, really important stakeholders for you. And I want to share today, just again, in the next few minutes, how you can bring them along on the journey and why it's so important. They have really crucial feedback. We've heard this many times. These are your end users. These are the people that if you don't get bought in early, this is the kind of things that they say. And for just cause. I mean, these people have jobs to do. We'd love to say that they're using technology because it's so amazing to use technology, right? But a lot of these people aren't tech savvy. They have a job to do. They have an outcome they're trying to reach. And the technology shouldn't be an obstacle, but they're using it because they have to, not because they want to. So what I've found is whenever you're taking something and changing it, right, there's an element of change management that is involved in that, which affects humans. And whenever you're taking something away or replacing something, you're causing disruption. And the disruption is with these particular people. And humans are unpredictable creatures for the most part. They have an emotional response to some of the things that we do, including technology. And so what we have to remember is that when we displace things and we change the behavior of how they did something yesterday to how they do it today, they can reject it. And we've seen this time and time again, right? They'll say, oh, I'll just wait for the next version. It doesn't have everything I want. They just don't even want to adopt it. They don't want to look into it. Or it's just too hard, right? It's an obstacle. It's not an extension. I like to say that our technology and the solutions that we put in front of these end users, these so important stakeholders, should be an extension of them, an extension of the human experience. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it should just feel very organic for them to use it. They should feel at the end of the day like, wow, I couldn't have got my job done without it. I don't think all technology works this way. And the really hard truth is users will continue to do what they do today versus adopting your new technology, even if it doesn't work great or even if it hurts for them to do it. Why? Because they know how to do it, right? They're comfortable with it. They know how to work around the things that don't work. they've figured out how to do their job. They've got this rhythm around it, and they're not willing to change that because that's disruptive and it makes them learn something else. And we like habits, and we're very habitual creatures. So when you put something new in front of someone and disrupt them, you're displacing something they do and you're forcing them to learn something. So that's why I want to again instill end user buy-in is just as critical as executive buy-in for the success of your project, for the success of moving to the cloud or any, again, digital transformation or big, large technology initiative that you're working on. End user buy-in is critical. So I want to talk to you today about why that is and how you do it. I think I've proven to you that these people have feedback. Their feedback can be detrimental to the success of your project, and a successful implementation does not equal successful adoption, which is a really important thing for you to remember. So what if I told you there was a way to think about this where you could achieve what you need to as a technologist, and be able to scale your technology and move forward and really go with the pace of technology, which is what we ultimately want to do. We don't want to get left behind. We don't want to have, that horrible word legacy, or God forbid, technical debt. We all know it. We've felt it. If you're in technology, you know exactly what I mean. And we have a really hard time going backwards to fix those things. So we want to be able to move forwards. We want to be able to advance what we're doing on the technology side. But we need to remember the end users when we do that. So I want to challenge you to think a little bit differently about the next initiative, or even the one that you may be working on right now. It says architecture here, but if for whatever reason you're not in the technology space or not a technologist and architecture is a heavy term for you, just think of it like a mindset. And so what we do at Adaptation is we think of these things when we're working with our customers, and we're scoping out how we can solve their unique business problems for their end users. And we look at this in the model of hub and spoke. And really all that means in its simplest terms is that at the hub, we want to consolidate and centralize what really matters to your business. So what is that? Well, think your database, think your overall business focus, your systems, right? So that's really important. Why is that important? Because without that, I can't measure the health of my business. I can't forecast for sales. I can't understand where I need to make changes, operational efficiencies. There's so many reasons, right? You need to have that information. And let's face it, that's why we use all these systems to run our businesses, is because we want that data, right? So that's crucial to have integrity in that data and centralize it and protect it and make sure that it's telling us the story and the answers that we need when we need them. That's where executive buy-in is crucial, right? That's why they love these projects, because it's the promise of having everything in one place where they can get the answers they need quickly. What the problem is with end users, and you can see all these spokes kind of around the hub, with the end users, they don't have a vested interest in that. They just want to do their jobs, and their jobs are all sort of tangential to the overall running of the business, that holistic view of the health of your business. So, but what if we could think about this differently, where we really focus on those end users, those stakeholders that often get left behind, and we build unique experiences that work with them. And that way they're able to operate independently, and the business still gets what they need. And that's what hub and spoke is all about. It's really thinking a little bit differently about how we architect and design these experiences so that we can focus on that end user and build something that's personalized, that's organic, that feels like an extension to them, but yet the business still gets what they need. And honestly, they get it better than they did before. Why is that? Because now we get the adoption aspect, right? Remember, successful implementation does not equal successful adoption. So we need the users bought in, because if they're not using the system and they're not using it well or appropriately, guess what happens? Your business data is inaccurate or missing or fragmented or all of those things. And so then we don't get the full holistic picture. So if you think that when your users haven't adopted your system and they're not using it appropriately, and or have as you intended or originally designed, that you're still getting the data you need, you're wrong. So your users are helping you get that holistic picture of the business. So it's really crucial that you do focus on them and you get their buy-in early. So I've challenged you to think differently. I've convinced you that end users are an important stakeholder that you can't leave behind. How do you approach this? Like, where do I start? And so what we do here at Adaptation is we have some what we call the key design principles, or steps, if you will, around how to approach this. So it shouldn't be a surprise that step number one is know who your users are and identify their job to be done. It's going to be really hard to build something that caters to a personalized experience for a particular stakeholder if you don't know who they are. And then also, if you don't understand the outcomes they're trying to achieve, and that's what we call the job to be done. What are they actually trying to do? What's the destination? You can't carve a path and a plan to get there if you don't understand where they're trying to go. So really deeply understand that. And how we do that is we ask a lot of questions. We spend a lot of time. We don't jump to solution. Your customers and your users will push you there very, very fast. There's a phrase I say to my team quite often, which is love the problem. Stay in the problem space as long as you possibly can. That's where you learn. You learn about your own abilities to deliver in technology, sure, in the solution space. You get feedback, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, also in the solution space, but love the problem. Like really focus on what the problems are you're trying to solve, so you really understand what those are, because the solving part, like I said, technology is advancing so much faster than we are. That solving part, you'll get there a lot faster. Should be the shortest leg of the trip. The longest leg of the trip is really understanding what is the problem you're trying to solve in the first place. Because if you rush to solution, you're probably going to solve the wrong problems. And guess who that's going to impact? Your end users. You get it. So how do you do that? You collaborate with them. I like to call this, it's probably no surprise given my background around co-founding an initiative around diversity and inclusion. I call this inclusive design. And what do I mean by inclusive design? I mean, you're working with your end users, that very important stakeholder. You're designing, you're building with them. This goes back to like staying in that problem space, and you're getting their buy-in early. That's the magical part of this. By building with them and not for them, now they're bought in because they feel like they built it. So there's so many benefits of doing that. So I challenge you to really think about, how do you spend more time with the end users? And I mean, not the executives that signed off on the project. I mean, the actual human beings that are using it, those people that I showed you just a moment ago, those are the people that are going to really say what success looks like for you in this whole initiative. So the third part of this, and where we, again, is the most crucial for those executives and for the business as a whole, is that database integrity piece. And so we believe that making sure we focus there and we keep those things centralized and pure, then we can build these tangential experiences that are focused around the end users, and it will guide them to a place where we ensure that the database has integrity and that the data is accurate, and it's giving that holistic picture of the business. So just as important as knowing who your users are and what they're trying to achieve is you need to know where they're trying to do it. I think we all saw in the pandemic that this changed, right? We saw a lot of different ways of working, different places we were working, different mediums we were working on. This matters, right? A mobile experience is very different than a desktop experience. Where are your users doing the things that they're trying to achieve? That matters, and you need to understand that and spend time really appreciating what they're trying to do and where. And then finally, arguably the most important step of all of this is listening, like truly listening to your users. This can be scary as technologists, I think, and I'm not immune to this. We often are a little bit fearful of feedback, partly because we don't want someone to tell us that what we built isn't beautiful, but also we're afraid that they're going to ask for something that's really, really tough that could cause a re-architecture, a redesign, a refactor. Anything that has re in front of it scares us, right? It screams dollar signs and time and effort. And so we are afraid of rejection in that space. So we're afraid to listen to our users. You need to put that fear aside if you want this to work. Your end users are going to have feedback. If you want to ensure not just initial adoption, but retention, which we'll see why that's important as well, you have to listen. You have to create a feedback loop. And that doesn't mean, like, you can put the fear aside. That doesn't mean you have to do everything they're asking. It means you have to be able to give them the feedback of why they can already do what they're asking to do. Maybe they just don't know how to use your solution, or why this isn't something that you should focus on right now. But you have to listen. You have to create that feedback loop. So these are the steps that we take. And this is an investment. This isn't something that we all do organically. This is something we have to have intention around. And it does cost money, and it does cost time, and it does cost people and resources. So why would you do that? If I'm going to tell you there's a cost, I hope there's also a benefit on the other side, right? And so there is. So training costs are definitely going to decrease. Why? Because you've built with them, and you've got their buy-in early. They feel like they actually built the solution. So they're not going to need as much training. Maybe they don't need any, because they know exactly how to use it because they've helped design it. User adoption, similarly, they're going to be able to ramp up adoption like a hockey stick. It's going to be really fast because they're going to be excited because they're again going to feel like they were an artist with the paintbrush with you, and they're going to want to adopt it really fast. Optimizing teamwork flows is one of my favorite things. These are like the hidden gems that pop up during the process of things that perhaps were automated before that never quite worked well. And you identify that through staying in the problem space, or things that are manual that could be automated that they didn't even realize was actually really easy. So there's some really awesome things that pop out of that process. And those are some of my favorites, because those are the surprises, good surprises, that really benefit the end users and the team. And then finally, user retention. We talk a lot about adoption and accelerating adoption, getting people all on the solution, getting their buy-in. But how do you keep them? How do you keep them using it? It's no sense in having a hockey stick, and then all of a sudden, within a month, nobody's using your solution, and it essentially ends up on the shelf. You have to keep them, and how you keep them is keeping them engaged. How do you keep them engaged? You ask for their feedback, and you listen, and you respond to it. And that doesn't always mean delivering what they ask for, every single enhancement or feature, but it does mean being engaged and communicating with your community and building that user community. And make it easy for them to give you feedback. That's the other key piece. Sometimes it's really hard to give feedback, and hard to know if your feedback's being heard. And if people don't feel heard, they'll stop giving feedback, and they'll eventually drop off. So you will lose retention. So that's my story around how I think you should focus on the end user. Hopefully I've challenged you to think a little bit differently today around that. If you want to take a snap of this is all the different places you can connect with me and different things I have going on. I'm always excited to meet new people and talk about these topics. And obviously the topic of diversity and inclusion is something I'm really passionate about as well. So feel free to reach out to me there. And then finally, I'll just leave you with this parting thought. Successful implementation does not equal successful adoption, and successful adoption does not equal successful retention. So you need to really be sure that your end users are bought in, and that this is an important stakeholder, and not to leave them behind.
All right, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? If you want, just let me know, and I can either allow you to talk, or you can put the question in chat. And all right, Melissa, I did have a question. Can you kind of give an example of how to apply this, like maybe in the agile? If people are applying an agile framework, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think it's so appropriate in that sense, actually, because you're really going to build that feedback loop and work more inclusively with your end users and your team. I think, traditional agile, I would say you're building something within like a set time period, right? You usually time box that, let's say a 2-week sprint, and you engage with stakeholders at the beginning. A lot of the times, I think traditionally we do that internally. So I challenge you to engage with the stakeholders that are outside of your development group, right? So outside of your Scrum team or whatever that assembly of people building this together are, and really bring them in for, traditionally, I would say you have like milestones where you demo or engage with people. That's where you want those times to be. So if it's a 2-week time period, I would say, every few days or every other day, even as often as you're comfortable with, as often as you have something of worth to show or showcase or engage with end users, you bring them into the process. So that means you have to have people that are going to give you time, right? Like that they're going to engage. But I think if you set the tone for why that's important for them to do that with you, it works really well. We do that with our customers. We actually get them really engaged from the beginning. Again, we stay in that problem space a long time to build out the backlog, right? Like what are the user stories? What are the acceptance criteria? How are you going to know if you've met what the users want to see at the end of that? And then how do you check in with them often throughout the process? So I think agile methodology of delivery actually works really nicely with this. I think it's a great way to do that. So I think it's like taking an end user and making them part of your Scrum team, if that makes sense. Like just literally embed them in the process.
Yeah, that does it. And where I work, we often have, we get invited to participate in certain betas, but it's not all the time. So I think if you have a large user group that is willing to do something for maybe a short period of time, you can break your people up in that, and they don't see that you're constantly doing that. Right. You have a new pool that comes in, and you'll see the old pool maybe in 2 months or something. But yeah, that's so we don't get worn out by trying to help, but we still do. Plus, Amazon gift cards are always helpful at the end.
I was gonna say incentives are great, and there's some that are just, like the moral incentive of helping, right? But I think, sure, cash money and gift cards are always helpful, I think. And honestly, like a preview, like people like to be first, right? I think we as humans love to feel like there's some like exclusive access to something. There's something to be said about that, right? Like we love the VIP experience, and people are willing to pay a lot extra for that, right? I think so, catering to that as well, and like what are they going to get out of it, whether it's financial incentives or gifts, but also like the incentive of being the first one and having the opportunity to shape what that looks like, and have their sort of stamp on it for the rest of the user community.
Yeah, that sounds, yeah, exactly. All right, well, does anybody else have a question?